9 Scariest Unsolved Mysteries That Happened on Thanksgiving. When most Americans are feasting and celebrating on Thanksgiving Day, some people are killing, dying, or vanishing. Creepy Thanksgiving crimes, unfortunately, are a ghastly tradition, too, one we rarely speak about. But disappearances on Thanksgiving and other unsolved Thanksgiving mysteries can make for interesting dinner conversation to distract from the usual chatter about sports, or drunken uncle rants about politics and religion. Just don't share any of these stories with the kids. Except maybe the D.B. Cooper one, because it has all the components of a good folktale. 1. Shane Montgomery might have been a victim of the Smiley Face Killer. A string of drownings by Midwestern, college-aged males led many to believe an organized group of killers were taking out their victims one by one. Is a shadowy but organized cabal of serial killers responsible for murdering 40 or so drunken white college-aged males and then dumping their cadavers in waterways to wash away the physical evidence? And are these demented and demonic bastards taunting police by drawing smiley faces near where they send the bodies to a watery grave? Should we, as Americans generally, but more specifically the drunken white college-aged males among us, be very, very afraid? Or is the Smiley Face Killer's theory simply some implausibly grandiose delusion concocted by a pair of attention-starved former police detectives who've woven a fairy tale around what most experts insist is a string of accidental and unrelated drownings? In other words, is the theory for real? Or just really dumb? Either way, it is stubbornly persistent. It won't die, no matter how many people try to kill it. In 2008, retired New York police detectives Frank Gannon and Anthony Duarte went public with what many have dismissed as a cockamamie theory. They claim that starting around 1997 and stretching across 11 states from New York to Minnesota, more than 36 waterlogged corpses that had been dredged from rivers and lakes and ponds shared too many similarities for it all to be coincidental. Almost without exception, victims were white, college-aged males whom Gannon and Duarte described as athletic, good-looking, and academically successful. They theorized that the perpetrator was possibly clumsy, ugly, and dumb, and therefore motivated by envy. The victims all being spotted at local bars or parties getting drunk on the evening they disappeared. In at least a dozen cases, smiley faces were found painted near where the detectives determined the bodies had been dropped in the water. Nearly all of these alleged drowning victims were discovered in frigid northern climates during the winter months, a ball-shrinking climatic scenario in which even the drunkest of frat dude might hesitate to wander near a body of water, yet there was no discernibly similar pattern of alcohol-related drownings in the much warmer southern states, even in summertime. Since some of the disappearances occurred on the same night in different states, the detectives concluded that a well-structured organization of killers was responsible. Nearly all of the alleged smiley face murder cases are still classified as accidental drownings. But at least 2 of them were eventually determined to be homicides. 1. 21-year-old Patrick McNeil was last spotted drinking with friends at Manhattan's Dapper Dog Bar one night in February of 1997. His corpse was dragged out of the East River 2 months later and 12 miles away. He was found floating in the water face up, which is extremely rare for drowning victims. An autopsy revealed ligature marks around his neck. His groin area, skip this part if you're easily nauseated, showed housefly larvae that had to have been laid on his body indoors and under warm conditions. In other words, McNeil was dead before he ever hit the water. And although he'd been missing for 2 months when his body was found, the absence of what's known as skin slippage under his feet indicated he'd been in the water for less than a day. 2. On Halloween night 2002, 21-year-old University of Minnesota student Chris Jenkins was last seen being kicked out of a Minneapolis bar. 4 months later, his body was found encased in ice in the Mississippi River, face up with his hands folded across his chest. Again, not the typical position for a drowning victim. Despite its glimmering sheen of wackiness, some experts support the smiley face theory. According to forensic pathologist Dr. Cyril Wecht, the statistics are so stacked against this number of men, young men, Caucasian males, found in bodies of water in that cluster of states, within that period of time that it's almost mathematically impossible for these incidents to be unrelated. Professor Lee Gilbertson, a nationally acclaimed criminologist from Minnesota's St. Cloud State University, originally dismissed the theory as an urban legend. After scrutinizing the evidence, though, he unabashedly declared that the Smiley Face Killers were a real nationwide organization that revels in killing young men. Despite such support, Gannon, Duarte, and their goofy little theory have legions of critics. Criminal profiler Pat Brown calls the theory ludicrous, absolutely insane, and notes that smiley faces are one of the most common forms of graffiti. It's not an unusual symbol. If you look in an area 5 miles square, I bet you could find a smiley face. In 2008, the FBI issued a press release claiming that we have not developed any evidence to support links between these tragic deaths or any evidence substantiating the theory that these deaths are the work of a serial killer or killers. The vast majority of these instances appear to be alcohol-related drownings. In 2010, the Center for Homicide Research released a document called Drowning the Smiley Face Murder Theory that outlines 18 reasons they feel it's false. Among these points are none of the smiley faces exactly match one another, there is no evidence of victim trauma, and these drownings don't fit the serial killer motive. Gannon, who once claimed to have mortgaged his house so he could pursue his smiley face investigations, seems to have stopped researching the case sometime around 2012. He and Duarte have reportedly moved on to more lucrative cases. Several surviving parents of alleged smiley face victims have also expressed doubts about the former detectives' motives for ever making a big public stink about their theory. When Bill Shostak's son died in Albany, NY, it was classified as a drowning, although Shostak says he still thinks it's murder. But he's utterly disenchanted with Detective Gannon. I feel Kevin is like a sponge, he latches onto the families, sucks the life out of them, and when he has nothing else to suck, he dumps them. Do I think he has re-victimized families and done more harm than good? Yes, I do, and that's a shame. Despite all this, the smiley face theory persists. It was invoked after the 2012 disappearance of a Northwestern University student whose floating corpse was found near smiley face graffiti on a tree. It was invoked by a black Wisconsin columnist after a young white male's body was found in the Milwaukee River. According to Eugene Kane of OnMilwaukee.com, I've been warned in the past not to talk about a secret killer of white men in Wisconsin who prey on drunken, college-age males in order to find a way to drown them in the river. I'm still intrigued why black males who drink a lot don't end up in the river and why that particular racial angle seldom gets discussed. Most recently, the smiley face killer theory was invoked this February in regards to the reputed drowning death of 21-year-old Shane Montgomery, who had last been seen drinking with friends the day before Thanksgiving but whose body wasn't found until right before Christmas. If I had to venture a guess, I'd say the theory is wrong. At most, its proponents may have unwittingly spurred 1 or 2 copycat murders by some bored dimwits in the frozen Midwest. Otherwise, it's mostly coincidence. But the myth lingers to feed that oddly persistent and almost universal human need to be terrified. Whatever the truth is, it's obvious that somebody is fucking with us, and smiling about it. 2. The Blunt family was killed by a briefcase bomb on Thanksgiving Day. The Blunt family of Lake Worth, Texas, were returning from a Thanksgiving outing in 1985, when 15-year-old daughter Angela Blunt found a briefcase on the porch of their mobile home. When opened, the briefcase exploded, killing Angela, her father Joe, and her cousin, Michael Columbus. 10 years later, a man named Michael Tony was convicted of the crime, but his conviction was overturned because the prosecution withheld evidence that contradicted witness testimony and exonerated Tony. Since he arrived on Texas death row in 1999, Michael Roy Tony has proclaimed his innocence to anyone he thought might listen. His relentless campaign of correspondence has targeted reporters, prosecutors, jurors and relatives of the 3 people he was convicted of killing in the 1985 Thanksgiving Day bombing of a Lake Worth trailer. He tried to sell tickets to his execution on eBay, a ploy, he said, to draw attention to his case. "I've been screaming that I'm innocent this entire time," he said December 3 from inside a small, sealed compartment where death row inmates meet with visitors. 9.5 years later, he has everyone's attention. Last week, the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals overturned Tony's capital murder conviction because Tarrant County prosecutors withheld evidence favorable to his defense. Among the 14 documents were records that cast doubt on the testimony of 2 key witnesses against him. The Tarrant County District Attorney's Office is weighing whether to retry the 23-year-old case. An official said last week that the office intends to, but that it has not made a final decision. Tony's defense team alleges that his conviction was the product of the manipulation and intimidation of witnesses during the investigation and prosecutorial misconduct in the courtroom. At the time of Tony's arrest, they say, the case was the longest-running unsolved bombing investigation in the U.S. "I think a task force was formed to solve this and was clearly motivated to get someone," said Rebecca Barakahan, one of Tony's attorneys. Mike Parrish, the lead prosecutor in the first trial, left the district attorney's office this year. He recently declined a request for an interview, saying he could not comment on a pending case. Officials with the district attorney's office have denied that they knowingly sponsored false or misleading testimony and say their opinion on Tony's guilt has not changed. "We still think he is the man that committed the offense," said Chuck Mallon, chief of the appellate division. Relatives of the victims are equally unswayed by the new evidence. "I know that Michael Tony is as guilty as he can be," said Susan Blunt, whose husband and 15-year-old daughter died. "He is squirming and trying to get out of it because he never wants to admit it. He never will." Blunt's sister, Lynn Wright, whose son died, said, "He is guilty 100%. He did it no matter what is coming out or what his attorneys say was lacking in evidence or wasn't turned over." No physical evidence connects Tony to the bombing. Tony, who was 19 when it occurred, was convicted on the testimony of his ex-wife and a former best friend. His lawyers say one need only look at the recent string of exonerations in Dallas County for proof that eyewitness testimony can lead to false convictions. "Most people think if you're convicted, you must have done it," said Tony, now 42. "But the system relies on people. People are fallible. People have a tendency not to tell the truth." An angry, violent bomb. November 28, 1985, was Thanksgiving Day, the last day Blunt's family was whole. "Every year, you kind of go through it again in your mind," she said. "You miss the people who are missing from your family every time you sit down to dinner or play a game." It was a cold day, the temperature topped out at 42. The Dallas Cowboys, behind Danny White's 4 touchdown passes, beat the St. Louis Cardinals 35-17. In their rented trailer in the Hilltop Mobile Home Park, Susan Blunt shared an afternoon holiday feast with her husband, Joe Blunt, 44, daughter, Angela, 15, son, Robert, 14, and her nephew Michael Columbus, 18, who was visiting from Oklahoma. That evening, Susan took a nap. Around 9 p.m., Joe and the kids went to a nearby convenience store for snacks. While they were gone, Susan heard a knock at the front door. She did not get up to answer it. When Joe, a mechanic, and the children returned about 20 minutes later, they saw a briefcase on the front porch. Angela, imagining it full of treasures, brought it inside and opened it, her brother later testified. Robert heard a click, the sound of a Victor Mo strap triggering a bomb consisting of 2 galvanized metal pipes filled with smokeless gunpowder, gasoline in a glass container, a model rocket motor and a 9-volt battery. The FBI later characterized it as an angry, violent bomb intended to kill whoever opened the briefcase. Angela, Joe and Michael died almost instantly. Robert was blown through a doorway. The heat melted his shoes into his feet, Susan said. Robert survived, but with scars on his face, back, stomach and legs. Susan escaped unharmed. Later, after Tony was convicted, Susan and Robert moved to the West Coast. "If someone from church left something on our doorstep for us, "I would be terrified," she said. "If a car was behind us, we would turn down a different street to get home. We didn't know why somebody did that to us." A cold case for 12 years. Authorities didn't know why either. There seemed to be no sensible reason why the Blount family would be targeted. A man who lived in a trailer across from the Blounts was involved in drugs and weapons sales. He later told investigators that he believed that the bomb was meant to be left outside his home. Authorities investigated an Israeli businessman who had been arrested for selling a briefcase bomb to undercover agents with the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco and Firearms. They investigated a 15-year-old named Michael Huff, who some people said had bragged about the bombing. Both suspects passed lie detector tests. Years passed. In 1996, what became known as the Blount Task Force, a multi-jurisdictional team of investigators led by the ATF, was formed. But the case remained cold, until summer 1997, when a prisoner in the Parker County Jail brought Michael Toney to the task force's attention. It was the first time anyone working the case had heard his name. 3. Rapper Soulja Slim was gunned down the night before Thanksgiving. New Orleans-based rapper Soulja Slim, whose real name was James Tapp, was on the verge of mega fame when his life was cut short by a gunman on Thanksgiving Eve, 2003. Though a suspect was arrested, who claimed he'd been hired to kill Tapp for $10,000, the case was dropped due to a lack of witnesses. Tapp's murder remains officially unsolved, including the identity of the person who hired the alleged hitman. Soulja Slim's song Slow Motion, a collaboration with Juvenile, became a Billboard #1 hit 6 months later. When homicide detectives gathered early Saturday on a blighted Gentilly Street, and tended to the city's latest victim, they found a familiar face. There in the 3500 block of Hamburg Street lay Gerald Smith, 29, dead of gunshot wounds to his head and chest. During the past decade, Smith bedeviled the knob like perhaps no other accused criminal. Time and again, prosecutors and police tied him to violent crimes, locked him up and prepared a case, only for it to fall apart. Police alleged in 2003 he was paid $10,000 to fatally shoot renowned local rapper Soulja Slim, born James Tapp. Witnesses wouldn't come forward, and the case was dropped. That same year, cops claimed Smith killed Spencer Smith Jr. again. Witnesses wouldn't come forward, and the case was dropped. In 2007, Smith was jailed in the killing of 24-year-old Mandel Duplessis. Smith was also jailed that year in the killing of Terry Brock. Again, no witnesses, no case. There would be other arrests, guns, drugs, trespassing. They would have similar fates. Smith, meanwhile, became a poster boy for the factlessness of the city's criminal justice system. He garnered notoriety in national news outlets. In court, he was soft-spoken but assured, carrying himself with ease even as he faced a potential lifetime behind bars. His orange prison garb was almost always oversized, and 5 feet, 6 inches and 155 pounds, he was small in stature, but his legend outsized. On the streets, he was whispered about in almost mythic tones. Some called him a hitman, an enforcer, a one-of-a-kind criminal who never left his neighborhood. And it was there, a block from where he used to live, that he died from a gunshot. The New Orleans Police Department's news release on the murder is short and blunt. Officers received a call of a man shot, and upon their arrival, found the victim suffering from several gunshot wounds. The release makes no mention of the story behind Smith, or of the many times police played the cat-and-mouse game and lost. NOP officials declined to comment about the death of the longtime suspect Monday. The department has released no details on a possible motive or suspect in Smith's killing. Smith had been in and out of jail since at least 1998, though he garnered few convictions as an adult. One of the rare cases that didn't evaporate was a 1998 conviction for attempted possession of a firearm while in possession of narcotics. A judge sentenced him to 5 years in prison, but then allowed Smith to complete a guide in the local boot camp program while on probation. He had 4 separate cases hanging over his head when he died. His most recent arrest was June 26, when police allegedly caught him with a gun and a bag of marijuana. He was scheduled to appear in court later this week for arraignment. If history is any guide, Smith probably would have pleaded not guilty. 4. Teenager Karen Mitchell vanished without a trace on Thanksgiving. Karen Marie Mitchell disappeared from Eureka, California, on Thanksgiving Day, 1997. She was off school for the holiday, and she had just left her place of employment and stopped by a shoe store owned by her aunt and legal guardian, Annie Casper. Karen visited briefly with Casper, then headed home to prepare for the holiday festivities. But she never made it there. A witness claims he saw Karen get into a blue sedan driven by an older white man shortly after leaving the mall where her aunt worked. This man has never been identified, though 2 high-profile suspects were examined in connection with the case. The first was convicted murderer Wayne Adam Ford, who fit the witness's description of Karen's kidnapper, but though he confessed to several murders, Ford denied any involvement in Karen's case. Police were never able to tie him to the crime. The second suspect was Robert Durst, subject of the recent HBO documentary The Jinx. Durst appears to have visited Casper's store several times, and was in Eureka the day that Karen disappeared. But like Ford, police have been unable to definitively link Durst to the crime. Karen's fate remains unknown. Dave Paris never met Karen Mitchell, but her face is as familiar to him as that of his own children. Paris was working as a detective with the Eureka Police Department when the teenager disappeared 15 years ago. "I will never forget her short hair, her beautiful eyes and cheeks," Paris said. "I remember the jewelry that she wore and the clothes that she had on. I have never met Karen Mitchell. To this day, I have never met her, but when you go into her bedroom, read her college applications, talk to her family, you begin to know her." One of Eureka's enduring unsolved mysteries, Mitchell was living with her aunt and uncle, Annie and Bill Casper, when she disappeared. Just 5 days shy of her 17th birthday, she was last seen walking along Broadway on November 25, 1997, to the Coastal Family Development Center, where she cared for children. Despite countless hours spent by volunteers and law enforcement banging on doors, scouring Eureka's marshes and running down thousands of tips, she has not been seen since. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children recently sent out reminders marking the 15th anniversary of the teen's disappearance, asking anyone with information about Mitchell or her disappearance to step forward. "Any tip would be something," said Paris, who became the lead investigator on the case with David Walker of the Humboldt County Sheriff's Office after Mitchell went missing. Although he is now the Humboldt County Coroner, and the case has been transferred to the Humboldt County District Attorney's Office, Paris said he still thinks about it constantly. As does Walker, who retired from the Sheriff's Office nearly 12 years ago and now works for the U.S. Marshal's Office in Eureka. He said community members often ask him about Mitchell. "She lingers in the community," he said. "But any exciting new tips? No, we haven't had anything major in some time." The initial investigation, although the case has grown cold over the years, it didn't start out that way. Paris remembers spending hours, working holidays away from his wife and children, sorting through the thousands of leads that poured in from the community. Stacks of papers related to the case fill nearly 30 volumes and stand over 6 feet high. A command center was set up in a donated room at Eureka, and for the family, volunteers and law enforcement officers from multiple agencies who turned out to assist in the case. "I remember the Christmas tree that was downstairs and remember sitting upstairs in the room," Paris said. "It was a very lonely time because we were missing someone who was very young. It was a time of year when you want to be happy, but we couldn't be." At one point, Paris received a tip that he thought might break open the case. A former police officer told the investigator that he had to slam on his brakes to avoid hitting a car that had slowed to speak with the girl resembling Mitchell the day she disappeared. Because the driver had irritated the man, Paris said he was able to recall in detailed description the car, a light blue 1977 Ford Granada. Using a DMV printout, Paris and a retired DPD detective crisscrossed the West Coast tracking down each of the 1,200 vehicles that matched the description. Paris said they ultimately failed to get a solid lead. It wouldn't be the first time. There was the caller who claimed to have heard details of Mitchell's kidnapping and murder. Then there was a letter to the Times-Standard from Topaz, who said police should try looking behind Taco Bell and Bayshore Mall. In 1999, Paris interviewed confessed serial killer Wayne Adam Ford after the 36-year-old trucker walked into the sheriff's department carrying a female breast in his pocket and told officers he had killed a woman. In the end, investigators could not connect Ford to the Mitchell case. In 2004, police set off on the largest land search since Mitchell disappeared. Investigators and cadaver-sniffing dogs inspected a fenced area near the foot of Truesdale Street and other locations at the foot of Hilfiker Lane, looking for clues. At least one house was also searched, and new interviews were conducted. So far, the search efforts have produced no results. Walker said the 2004 search still rankles him. "My best guess, for a long time, was that we would find her there," he said. "I was convinced. It's hard when a case turns out this way. You just want resolution." Paris said he doesn't regret how he worked the case, but it still keeps him up at night. "I've spent so many sleepless nights just thinking about what I missed, what hasn't been reported, the leads I had," he said. "How could I not think about it? This was a young, bright and intelligent girl with a bright path in front of her. A promising future. The day Mitchell disappeared she had been filling out college applications," Paris said. She was planning to go to Humboldt State University and was interested in politics, especially involving the environment, and in children. "She was 16, very liberal and opinionated," said Paris, adding that he found recovered video of Mitchell attending a Save the Redwoods rally at the Humboldt County Courthouse. "She was there, standing against the wall, quiet and content. I spoke with her teachers, I read her applications. You could tell she was going to be successful. She was going to be a person who would make a real difference." Mitchell moved to Humboldt County from Southern California when she was 13 to live with her aunt and uncle. Her parents were divorced, and both Mitchell and her mother thought the rural environment would be better for her. Paris said the love Annie Casper had for her niece was obvious. "Annie didn't have a daughter," he said. "She had 2 sons. For her, Karen was more like a daughter than her niece. I don't think a day goes by when she doesn't think about her." Still missing Eureka Police Chief Merle Harfin was the captain of EPD's investigative division when Paris was assigned to the case. He said he will never forget Mitchell's disappearance. "I don't think anyone who was around at the time will," he said. "It really shocked the whole town." At the time, Annie and Bill Casper were both well known in the business and law enforcement communities, Harfin said. Annie Casper still owns Annie's Shoes. Mitchell had left the store on her way to work when she disappeared. Bill Casper, now retired, worked as the supervisor of the State Department of Justice Crime Lab in Eureka. The case was hard on the family and the community, but it was also hard on the investigators. Walker said although he and Paris did the best they could, the case reached a point where there wasn't much for them to follow up on. "The family never gives up," Walker said. "They want to talk, they have ideas. Obviously, you want to do the best you can and to help ease them along through this tragedy, but you can only do so much." Paris said he doesn't think he will ever stop thinking about Mitchell. "I have worked many homicides and major crimes, but this is one that I will never forget because it was so important to the community, and it was so important to me," he said. "As a cop, I knew I was supposed to get the job done and solve the case. But this case didn't get solved. That doesn't leave you. It just never leaves you." Both men hold out hope. Walker said he is just waiting for the right person to read a flyer or pick up the paper. "I think there is always a chance," he said. "It just takes the right person coming forward." According to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, nearly 800,000 children are reported missing every year, with an average of 2,200 reported every day. Bob Lowry, The center's senior executive director said the majority of those children are found within the first few days. But that doesn't mean long-term missing children, like Mitchell, won't be found, he said. Lowry said anyone with information is asked to call local law enforcement or the center at 1-800-843-5678. Even though some may assume the worst has happened, there are a lot of cases where kids missing long-term are still out there and need to be found, he said. The public needs to understand that we are still looking for Karen. Law enforcement won't stop looking until she has been physically found. Parris said he is determined to make sure that happens. Hearing of cases that are solved after 20 or 30 years gives him hope. Given enough time and enough exposure, someone is bound to talk, he said. Normally, the results are not good after so long, but the case is solved, Parris said. That brings relief to the community and to the family. It's closure. We hope that someday that will happen for Karen Mitchell. 5. The Thanksgiving murder of a prominent Portland attorney may never be solved. Nancy Bergeson's best friend and two of her co-workers from the Federal Public Defender's Office spoke out Wednesday, sharing their dismay about the unsolved November 24, 2009, violent death of their friend. Our office is in such pain over this case, said Lisa Hay, an assistant federal public defender in the Portland office. We cannot understand why someone would kill Nancy. Bergeson, a 57-year-old assistant federal public defender known for her independent spirit and deep commitment to work, was found November 24, 2009, lying face down in the dining room of her Southwest Portland home. The girl who stopped by daily to walk her golden retriever saw her through a front window and alerted a neighbor. Portland patrol officers were called to the home in the 4100 block of Southwest Hamilton Street about 3 p.m. that day. Then a police forensic criminalist and a deputy medical examiner went to the home. The deputy medical examiner thought it was a natural death, and Bergeson's body was removed from the home. When an autopsy was done the next morning, it became clear Bergeson was strangled and homicide detectives were called to the house. There was no sign of forced entry, the house wasn't ransacked. But police said this week for the first time there were signs that Bergeson fought back against her attacker. It was so consistent with my best friend, said Colleen Scissors, who had worked with Bergeson for 8 years at the Federal Public Defender's Office until moving to Colorado in 1998, where she's now in private practice. There was no way she wouldn't fight back, Scissors said, speaking at the Portland Police Bureau on Wednesday. She described Bergeson as a strong woman who was a regular drag and boat competitive rower, who hiked and loved the outdoors. Without knowing what happened, Scissors said she suspected whoever attacked her friend had to be bigger than Bergeson. Scissors had communicated with Bergeson by email about 9 or 10 p.m. the night before her death. She had gotten a verdict, and she was pretty upset about it, Scissors said. Since Bergeson's death, her family and friends have worked to support Bergeson's daughter, Jamie. Scissors said she'll be officiating at daughter Jamie Bergeson Bradshaw's wedding on Labor Day in Park City, Utah. Bergeson's daughter will be attending Stanford University's business school in the fall. Amy Baggio, another co-worker of Bergeson, said she learned immensely from Bergeson, whom she described as a friend to all in the Federal Public Defender's Office. She was funny and fun and as beautiful inside as out, Baggio said. She said not having any sense or even a remote idea to why someone would harm a person who brought such joy is distressing. It's devastating, Baggio said. Of Bergeson, she added, she was relentless in her pursuit of justice. What we want is her to have that same justice. The Bureau's Cold Case Homicide Unit will now assist the lead detectives on the case. Lead it. Michelle Michaels declined any comment on the investigation, other than to say, I hope someone who may have information today will give us a call. We just keep working it, Michaels said. On Wednesday afternoon, the second annual Nancy Bergeson Ardent Advocate Lecture Series will be held at the Ace Hotel event space at 403 Southwest 10th Avenue. A reception will be at 4:30 p.m. in memory of Bergeson and as a celebration of defense attorneys. Scissors, Bergeson's friend, is the keynote speaker at 5 p.m. Her talk is titled, "Remembering Defense Basics, Building Trust and Humanizing Our Clients." The point is to bring an ardent advocate to inspire us and remind people why we do this, Hay said. The lecture series is sponsored by Pacific Northwest Law, the Federal Bar Association, Federal Public Defender's Office, the U.S. District Court Attorney Admissions Fund, and the Oregon Criminal Defense Lawyers Association. If Bergeson were alive, Scissors said, she'd say to the Portland Police Bureau, "Get your butts going and solve this murder." An autopsy revealed Beth had been stabbed several times in the chest, according to then Assistant Chief Deputy Coroner Anthony Pankowski. He said the condition of the skeleton was consistent with Beth being dead since the time of her disappearance. Pankowski also said that there was no way to determine if she had been sexually molested, though the lab was to run tests on her clothing. Some newspapers reported that the area adjacent to Restland Cemetery had been searched after Beth's disappearance, but police officials at the time, Thomas Harry Hodgins, who had been Wilkinsburg's chief in 1977, and former Monroeville chief George Grigowich, concurred the area had never been searched. The woman said police tracked her down at work and interviewed her a second time, which she recalls was around the time Beth's body was found. "I said to them, 'Whatever happened?' They explained about tracing the car back to the rental agency, which is about 3 miles driving distance from where Beth was eventually found. When the woman asked about the car, they told her the rental agency manager said it had never left the premises. I found that absolutely astounding," the woman said. "Obviously, they found the car. But the investigation never went anywhere. Frankly, that was the last I ever heard from them." Through the years, the woman has occasionally thought about the little girl who never made it home. Not long ago, she and an old friend talked about how they remembered going to see Walkin' Rosie, the ghost said to haunt Trestland Memorial Cemetery in Monroeville. The friend recalled that Beth's body had been found adjacent to the cemetery and that her killer had never been found. That same friend mentioned a cold case story about Beth's murder that appeared in Gateway Star newspapers in 2003. The woman looked it up online and found herself mentioned as the woman at the bus stop. But as she read further, something bothered her. The story noted that the day Beth was abducted, 3 newspapers in the former Dardanelle Publications weekly chain, the Penn Hills Progress, Churchill Area Progress and Wilkinsburg Gazette, all carried a story about the 1-year anniversary of the strangulation murder of Barbara Lewis of Penn Hills, whose body was found in a trash bin in the Blackridge Civic Association parking lot in Churchill. Lewis' belongings had been found in a wooded area off Princeton Boulevard in Wilkinsburg, the street where Beth lived. And then came the sentence that hit a little too close to home for the woman, the one that said that Lewis, too, had been waiting at a bus stop on Long Road in Penn Hills on the morning she was murdered on November 19, 1976. "There were just too many coincidences," the woman said. "There's got to be a connection. In fact, there has been some speculation that Lewis' murder was the last in a string of what is believed to be serial murders in western Pennsylvania between 1976 and 1977. And just a few weeks before Beth disappeared, 2 boys walking in the woods at Brady's Run Park found the skeletal remains of Stephanie Ann Baller of Beaver Falls, an apparent homicide victim, and there were some similarities between the cases. Some police believe that Beth's abductor was likely a pedophile and that there might not have been a connection to the incident at the bus stop earlier in the day. In retrospect, the woman feels very fortunate that she was standing on the passenger side of the car that day, 34 years ago. She doesn't want to think what might have happened if she'd been on the driver's side. That could have made a world of difference, the woman said. Looking back, the woman thinks Wilkinsburg police botched the case by holding on to it so long before turning it over to Allegheny County police detectives and not accepting help from more experienced Pittsburgh police detectives. She isn't alone. A man, who identified himself as the son of a former Turtle Creek policeman, also contacted the author of this story after seeing an account of Beth's murder. According to him, His father was at Keller's hardware store in Turtle Creek around the time of the kidnapping when a man walked in and bought a shovel and a few other items that raised the policeman's suspicions. The son said his father called Wilkinsburg police with information, but that no one ever checked out the lead. Had the man who kidnapped Beth continued along Ardmore Boulevard, it is not out of the question that he might have been in Turtle Creek, taking the back roads to Monroeville. Allegheny County Police Assistant Superintendent Jim Morton said the county has received a grant to review cold cases and that there are 3 boxes of reports from the Beth Barr case. He said cold cases are never closed. 8 months after Beth was laid to rest at Woodlawn Cemetery in Wilkinsburg, the woman and her husband relocated to a distant city. "I always wonder why I moved away from Wilkinsburg," she said. She might have answered that question several years ago when the city where she had lived for more than 20 years started to feel not so safe. That's when the woman and her family moved again. "It's a shame," the woman said, referring to the fact that Beth's killer has never been found. "I still don't believe it's a lost cause. Someone's going to come forward." 6. Young Bethelyn Barr disappeared on her Thanksgiving walk home. The woman stood alone at about 8:30 a.m. on November 23, 1977, at a Port Authority transit stop in Wilkinsburg, waiting for the bus that would take her to her job in downtown Pittsburgh. The 24-year-old had grown up in Wilkinsburg, and she and her husband had purchased a property on nearby Rebecca Avenue, which they were remodeling. The bus stop was close by on Ardmore Boulevard. As she waited in the chilly November air, a motorist pulled his car off the street, partially into an alley and onto the paved area of an auto repair garage, right next to her. "To the best of my recollection," the woman said, during an interview last week, "he made a suggestion I did not appreciate. Something about the man instinctually heightened the woman's sense of danger. When she threatened to call the police, he made a U-turn on Ardmore Boulevard and headed back toward the Parkway East. In 1977, there weren't personal cell phones, so carrying out her threat would have required making her way quickly to a nearby business, home or Johnston Elementary School, which was across the street. She did not report the incident to police after he left. But what the woman did do was to write down the red and white Ohio license plate number and note that he was driving a blue car. "I didn't think about it anymore," she said. About 2:15 p.m. that same day, Bethelyn Barr, 6, left Johnston Elementary School on Franklin Avenue, which dismissed an hour early because of the holiday. She crossed the street with classmates and began the 2/5 of a mile walk alone to her Princeton Boulevard home, heading up Ardmore Boulevard in the direction of the TV studios, past the bus stop where the man had approached the woman hours before. Beth turned left onto Marlborough Avenue, then immediately right onto Tramore Avenue. There, according to a witness, a man carried the schoolgirl fitting Beth's description into a dull blue sedan with red and white license plates. That was the last time anyone saw her. Beth's father, Charles, was a Wilkinsburg policeman. The police force sprang into action when she didn't come home from school. That evening, Wilkinsburg police knocked on the woman's Rebecca Avenue door as they canvassed the neighborhoods around the school. She shared the information about the man who had approached her that morning. Her description of the man and car pretty much matched that of the witness who saw Beth being carried to the car. Police described the suspect as a white male in his 40s, 5 feet 10 to 5 foot 11, medium build with medium brown, curly hair. He was wearing a gray suit and square, blue-tinted sunglasses. "He would have reminded me of someone with an office job," the woman said, adding that he was possibly wearing a necktie. She also remembers he was not an attractive person. She was surprised that the police didn't contact her again about the encounter as the investigation continued. "I never heard any more about it," the woman said, noting it was more than a year later when they talked to her again. Police thought they had found the car involved at Conley's Motor Inn, now the site of a Home Depot, on Business Route 22 in Wilkins Township. The vehicle belonged to a car rental agency based in the Motel and, according to records, had not been signed out on the days surrounding the kidnapping. A search of the blue car with red and white Ohio plates turned up nothing. Police from Wilkins and other local departments helped Wilkinsburg officers comb the woods behind Conley's, which yielded no clues. Neither did a search of the homes and woods in Wilkinsburg. On December 10, 1977, there seemed to be a break in the case. Police arrested a McCandless Township salesman in connection with the kidnapping, but charges were dropped when he established an alibi that he had been in Johnstown that day. Both the salesman and his brother agreed to submit to lie detector tests. Lieutenant Robert Thomas, then officer in charge of the Wilkinsburg Police Department, said in 1979 that he was not positive that they ever took the tests or, if so, what the results showed. A psychic had been called in soon after the kidnapping, and some 7 to 9 others offered visions of Beth's whereabouts, including water and grave markers. In March 1979, Joseph Leonard of Monroeville stumbled upon a partially exposed skeleton as he walked with his dog in the woods off Johnston Road in Monroeville, across from the part of Restland Memorial Cemetery where the duck pond is located. There was no doubt it was Beth. Though brush, dirt and leaves covered her skeleton, Beth remained dressed in the red pantsuit, blue tennis shoes and plaid coat she wore to school that November day. Thomas delivered the sad news to Donna and Charlie Barb, and their son James, at their Princeton Boulevard home exactly 16 months to the day, within the same hour that their daughter disappeared. The mounded grave appeared more piled than shoveled, former Monroeville police chief Willis Greenway said at the time. He noted, according to the crime lab, bodies sometimes surface following freeze-thaw conditions. 7. Shots through a curtained window killed 2 people during Thanksgiving dinner. It was shortly after 10 p.m. on a Thanksgiving night when a shooter took aim through closed curtains. When the shots were done, 2 people, a 19-year-old woman and 5-year-old boy, were dead. Nearly 8 years later, Tacoma police aren't much closer to solving the crime and need the public's help to arrest the person who killed Kimberly Riley and Jeremy Britbay in Thevong. His case is featured this weekend on Washington's Most Wanted, the Q13 Fox show that has helped capture nearly 100 fugitives. Former Louisiana Reserve police officer and current Q13 Fox weather forecaster Parella Lewis spoke with case investigators. The 2002 incident happened at a home on South 75th Street in Tacoma. The female who's deceased, her brother was friends of the family and he invited her down for Thanksgiving gathering, Tacoma detective Brian Vole told Lewis. The 5-year-old who died, this was his grandfather's house at the time of the incident. About 25 people were gathered at the home when the shooting happened. 2 others also were wounded. Witnesses saw a lone subject with dark hair and a puffy jacket run away from the window and run around to the corner of the house southbound on L Street, Vole told Lewis. Police are also interested in the suspect's getaway Ford pickup truck, a dark or brown color from the 1970s or late 80s. It had a white canopy with white letters on the tailgate. What's most troubling about this is they didn't care who they shot as long as they sent the message, Vole told Q13 Fox. They shot 4 innocent people who have no criminal background, no trouble in their life, they were just seated at the wrong place at the wrong time. The families of Riley and Britbay in Thevong are offering a $25,000 reward for information leading to the arrest and indictment of the killer. 8. There's an unsolved, century-old Thanksgiving murder in New York. One of the oldest unsolved Thanksgiving murders occurred almost a century ago in Schenectady County, NY. John H. Woodruff, a game protector for the county, left his home on Thanksgiving Day, 1919, to patrol the area, and never returned. His body was found almost 2 years later, in April 1921, buried in a shallow grave near a creek bed. The top half of Woodruff's skull had been detached, indicating that he had been killed by a blow from a large object, possibly an axe. Woodruff's wife claimed he had received, then destroyed, a threatening letter a few months before his disappearance, and a witness reported seeing Woodruff arguing with another man on the day in question. Woodruff and the man then walked off together into the woods. It was the last time anyone saw Woodruff alive. No suspect or motive was ever identified in Woodruff's case. After almost 100 years, his murder has remained unsolved. 9. Hijacker D.B. Cooper disappeared in the sky on Thanksgiving Eve. It was one of the longest and most exhaustive investigations in FBI history, and to this day remains the only unsolved skyjacking in the United States. In 1971, a well-dressed passenger hijacked a Northwest Orient flight, demanded $200,000 and later escaped by parachuting out of the back of the plane with the ransom money. But who exactly was D.B. Cooper, the mysterious man who managed to pull off the heist and disappear without a trace? More than 4 decades later, 3 amateur scientists think they may have found evidence that would narrow down Cooper's identity to that of an aerospace engineer or a manager. The scientists, working for a group called Citizen Sleuths, said they had been analyzing particles found on a clip-on necktie that Cooper left on his seat, 18E, before jumping out of the plane. To the naked eye, the piece of fabric was a nondescript black tie from JCPenney. But to the modern-day scientists, the tie was an incredibly fortunate piece of evidence in the investigation. A tie is one of the only articles of clothing that isn't washed on a regular basis, reads a section on the Citizen Sleuth's website devoted solely to the tie. It picks up dirt and grime just like any other piece of clothing, but that accumulation never truly gets reset in the washing machine. Each of those particles comes from something and somewhere and can tell a story if the proper instruments like electron microscopes are used. Using a powerful electron microscope, the scientists say they have identified more than 100,000 particles of rare earth elements on the tie, including cerium, strontium sulfide and pure titanium, according to the Associated Press. Of those, titanium was the most notable. Titanium was a rare metal in 1971 and this makes it extremely unlikely it is a post-event contamination, Citizen Sleuths notes on its site, which lays out in painstaking detail all of the findings from the case. Its presence constrains Cooper to a limited number of managers or engineers in the titanium field that would wear ties to work. At the time, they noted, the element was used extensively by the military in aircraft and helicopters. Scientists think he may have worked at Boeing, which at the time happened to be developing a supersonic transport plane that used those elements, Tom Kay, a lead researcher with Citizen Sleuths, told King 5 News. The tie went with him into these manufacturing environments, for sure, so he was not one of the people running these manufacturing machines, Kay told the news station. He was either an engineer or a manager in one of the plants. He added that the group was asking anyone from the public with information to contact researchers through the Citizen Sleuth's website. Someone may be able to look at those particles and say, "Oh my gosh, I know what that means having those particles on the tie," Kay told the news station. The mystery began on November 24, 1971, when a nondescript man going by the name of Dan Cooper purchased a one-way ticket from Portland, or, to Seattle directly from the Northwest Orient Airlines counter on the day of the flight. He used cash to pay for his ticket, then boarded the plane. Authorities later described him as someone in his mid-40s, dressed as an executive in a suit, a white shirt and what probably is the now infamous black tie. The agency's official summary of how the hijacking unfolded reads like the plot of a Hollywood thriller from another era. He ordered a drink, bourbon and soda, while the flight was waiting to take off. A short time after 3 p.m., he handed the stewardess a note indicating that he had a bomb in his briefcase and wanted her to sit with him. The stunned stewardess did as she was told. Opening a cheap attaché case, Cooper showed her a glimpse of a mass of wires and red-colored sticks and demanded that she write down what he told her. Soon, she was walking a new note to the captain of the plane that demanded 4 parachutes and $200,000 in $20 bills. When the flight landed in Seattle, the hijacker exchanged the flight's 36 passengers for the money and parachutes. Cooper kept several crew members, and the plane took off again, ordered to set a course for Mexico City. Somewhere between Seattle and Reno, a little after 8 p.m., the hijacker did the incredible. He jumped out of the back of the plane with a parachute and the ransom money. The pilots landed safely, but Cooper had disappeared into the night and his ultimate fate remains a mystery to this day. The FBI pursued hundreds of leads. No body or parachute was ever found, but in 1980, a boy digging near the Columbia River found 3 bundles of $20 bills whose serial numbers matched the money Cooper had demanded. The Cooper case baffled the FBI for 45 years, and in July, the agency announced it would no longer actively pursue the Norjack investigation, or Northwest hijacking. Over the decades, hundreds of tips had poured in, but none that could help prove culpability beyond reasonable doubt, the agency said. Every time the FBI assesses additional tips for the Norjack case, investigative resources and manpower are diverted from programs that more urgently need attention, the FBI said in a statement. Soon after the FBI dropped the case, Jeffrey Gray, the author of Skyjack, announced that he would make available hundreds of FBI files related to the Cooper case on True Inc., an online magazine Gray founded. By opening everything up to the public, Gray said he hoped to use people's enduring curiosity about the case to crowdsource, once and for all, Cooper's identity. "We're trying to solve one of the greatest unsolved mysteries of our time," he wrote on True Inc., "and we need your help."